Sure. On 6 o'clock, okay. Good evening and welcome to the Gresham-Barlow Board of Education, April 16, 2025 regular board work session. Call to order. Roll call, in attendance, Chris Howlett, Holly Riegelman, David Ligatich, and Dr. Mara Gomez. We have one vacant position. We have not heard yet from Blake Peterson or Sean Barnes. They may be joining us later. We do have a quorum, so our meeting is active. We have an agenda, and I just wanted to call to everyone's attention. We do actually have 2 action items on this agenda. Usually in work sessions, we don't do action items, but we have a couple of them as well as some other presentations. So if there are no questions about the agenda, I would accept a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
I move to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
Second
Second.
is by David to approve the meeting agenda as presented. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, opposed? We have an agenda, thank you. So our first item is Senate Bill 3, request for waiver. And this has presenter, Dr. Tim Coleman. So welcome.
Thank you. Sir, do you want to click through, do you want me to click through?
I can do your phone. Let me get a click wrap.
Well, sir, you can, I can direct you. Click on through it if you want.
That's on the record.
Yeah, okay, this meeting is being recorded.
It's a little challenge. For the participants. I'm gonna help them out. So we'll go to the next.
Yes, perfect. So this is just gonna be a presentation that I covered at the meeting back in February. So it's a quick review, just to see if there are any questions that come up. So this is really about Senate Bill 3, looking at opportunities for students around both personal finance and also career pathways. Both of those are required courses that the state put into play this last Senate. So it's looking both at opportunities and also we want students to achieve and align the work that they're doing in the high school setting with whatever their post-secondary plans might be. So just wanted to align that to the board conditions and let you see that connection there. So once again, what the state has said is out of the 24 credit requirements, that has not changed. That remains exactly the same. But what has changed is we are adding 1 credit, half of which is this higher education career pathway skills. The other half of the credit is personal finance education. And what we're proposing within the district is that those will be offered. The junior year will be the pathways work, and then the senior year will be the personal finance. As we look at the standards, if we left the career pathways, higher education for the senior year, it's too late. Most of our students have already decided what it is they want to do, where they want to go. So the junior year is kind of the sweet spot with that. As far as personal finance education, a lot of our students have told us that as they're making that transition from senior year to whatever happens next, that's where they're most curious about how do I make those transitions? What does it look like to balance a checkbook? There's no checkbooks these days, but you get the idea. How do I manage a credit card in debt? What does it look like to apply for a loan? Again, those sorts of things. And so just the relevance of being on their own in a matter of months. The content is very relevant for our students in that senior year of getting prepared for whatever that next step might be. So that's our plan. Right now, it's required for students who graduate in the class of 2027 and beyond. So next slide. This is just the overall timeline. Right now, we're in 24-25. As far as putting together resources, we've got a meeting actually next week on Tuesday. We're going to finalize what our career pathways course looks like and get that all all signed and sealed, and then after that, we'll start working with personal finance and what that would be, as that course, comes into play. As far as implementation is concerned, what we're proposing is instead of starting in 25-26, we're proposing that we start in 26-27 with the waiver. So we're not gonna start with, our classes this year. We're looking to that fall of 2026-27, but we're proposing what we're asking. And the rationale for that is really around FTE and funding. At the high school level, at both of our big high schools, we've just got them doing some cuts. This cut's actually directly related to some positions we were hoping to have in play for these two classes specifically. So that's the reason for the request for the waiver. Next. This is just simply saying who can teach the course, and it basically means anyone can teach the course who has a teaching license in the state. Next. This is about awarding credit, both for personal finance and also higher education. And again, we're looking for the personal finance education to provide opportunities with our financial algebra, allowing the course to meet both financial math credit or math credits and also the personal finance, because there's a significant overlap, and we want to make sure that we're not hindering students from what it is they want to do in terms of elective courses. There's not the same sort of opportunity for the career pathway skills. But that's what we're doing as far as those two courses are concerned. Career pathways will be its own separate course, and the personal finance needs to be its own separate course as well. So the next two slides, Sarah, just really say we could push those math standards or other sorts of content standards into these courses, but we can't push those standards out. They have to be standalone courses, both for personal finance and also for the career pathways. And the next slide basically shows this. So next. As far as the waiver process is concerned, what I'm going to be asking the board to make an action or a motion on tonight is to request a waiver. The waiver has to be submitted, I'm reading down to the very bottom, no later than July 1st, 2026. My recommendation is that we do that sooner than July 1st, 2026. And that should be board approved, a projected date for implementation, and the reason for seeking the waiver needs to be due to staffing. And the lack of staffing to have the courses in play. Next slide. So as far as our implementation plan, I talked about this just briefly, but the post-secondary pathways is going to be a grade 11 course. The content is almost finalized. Personal finance will be grade 12. The content for that we will start working on this year before the year gets done. As far as the reason for requesting a waiver without additional funding, that the state has not provided, it means we need to collapse our elective courses in order to find that FTE to produce the courses. So the new budget cuts have impacted our ability to implement beginning in the fall of 2025. So requesting for the board to approve a waiver to give us one more year to implement as far as these two requirements are concerned. So questions?
Just for my clarification, Tim, when we're talking about collapsing electives, that's CTE things as well as music.
Those are, yeah, well, it would most likely come out of CTE. And other sorts of electives that aren't required. There's not a lot of room to collapse like a choir, choir and band are running pretty tight in terms of FTE. So most likely would come out of our CTE electives by and large. Our CTE electives. Well, yes.
All of them.
Anything they've chosen
Yeah, culinary, all of that.
Well,
are,
Chocolate.
yeah, it's what you have related.
Question for Chris.
Yeah.
So there's only 4 of us here, and that's a quorum.
Yep,
If its vote is 3-1,
it doesn't pass.
I mean,
It has to pass with 4. 4 is what you have to pass it with. So that's okay.
So it would be implemented, or class of 2027 would have the requirement
Yes. No. So what we're requesting is instead of
waiver for that year.
implementing for the class of 2027, what
Okay,
we're requesting is a waiver for a 1-year pause, so to speak, to be more strategic in how we implement in order to make sure that the class of 2028 and beyond have those two courses embedded within their schedule.
if it doesn't pass, and we have to cut, pushed into math, or is it still its own course?
so most of our students will take it as its own course. There are a few students who will benefit who are taking financial algebra. And once again, we still need to work the details out, but we need to figure out how that would potentially work in terms of credit by proficiency. But the number of our students that are taking financial algebra is only a small segment of our class of 2027. So the personal finance course will be taken by the majority of our students.
And there's not enough staff right now to fully implement that. Is that what you're saying? But it's some of the people that would be available to teach those segments
Correct,
because of the current budget situation that we're in.
correct,
We calculated, is it 5 FTE to be able to roll it?
correct. It's about one, it's
High
about
schools?
across the whole, correct. It's one FTE in each of the courses that we offer at the high school. So it's gonna take about 12 sections or so of personal finance, and there'll be about 12 sections, so to speak, for career pathways. They just take the size of the class and just divide it by about 35. I think it ends up being like 11 courses or 11 and a half classes. And a teacher typically in a year will teach 12 sections. And so it's basically one section for each of those courses that are bigs. And then stream water trail would be included in that as well. So it takes us at about 4.5 to 5, right around there, as far as the activity that we would.
So. Sorry, this is a big one for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't do another waiver after this. Well, let's say we get into that 2028
Correct.
budget shortfalls. I mean, what are we planning on to not cut a CTE in 2028? Like, what are we saying?
So we're looking to be more strategic around taking a look at where our course numbers fall, especially this next year, to see where the cuts will have the least impact. Is what we're asking or requesting at this point.
Did you have another question, David? Because I've got a couple. So, I would sort of assume that we're not the only district in the state that's facing some of this because of the budget situation.
You are correct.
And is this something that, that it could be available in the future, near future, as online course that kids would just take it, or does it have to be with a teacher at school in a classroom?
We would have some contractual challenges with that because that'd be outsourcing our work. Teachers would have to be responsible for teaching it.
Okay.
Not state mandated, but
Contract.
contractually.
Our contract with the
Teachers,
teachers,
okay,
yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
and then, and so if for some reason if we don't do this tonight, then if we have to continue to do it into next year, 26, 27, then it would mean that the electives that students choose would be limited because one of them would have to be, something would go away in order to fund this for the staff member.
Correct.
Okay, I'm making
So-
sure I connected A to B to C.
So as of right now, so students have done forecasting for next year already. The students that will be juniors this next year, if we don't apply for the waiver, the students that are juniors or sophomores or should move into their junior year next year, because we want to do a 2-year sequence, grade 11 and grade 12, we would need to go back and readjust, remove an elective from what they forecasted for, and then put the career pathways in place. Because it's this year's sophomores over the class of 2027. So what we're saying is we need to go back and readjust.
But that same group of kids would get personal finance as a senior. We would have the waiver because then they would not be getting the pathways, is that right?
So we're thinking of a 2-year sequence where we would put pathways in starting in, Sarah, can you go back to the timeline slide? Perfect, right there. So instead of starting 25, 26 with pathways and then 26, 27 personal finance, because that's what we would need to meet the 2027 graduation deadline. What we're proposing is that we shift it a year, so the career pathway starts in 26, 27, and personal finance comes on board in 27, 28.
Are waivers always approved?
By the way,
Are waivers always approved when you apply for it?
I wouldn't say always, but
Yeah.
often for sure.
yeah, regularly, more consistent.
What would make it not get approved?
If
That's-
they added funding to Measure 98, with the expectation that it's supporting this work, something like that could happen in the past, I would think.
Well, and probably your reasoning for applying, if the reason for applying is we just don't want to.
Yeah.
So if this is a CT, or these are CTE courses, wouldn't, and we have other CTE courses already in place. Are we not getting additional funding for completers, especially non-traditional completers? From the state? That was my understanding with CTE courses a few years ago, that if you had completers, kids who completed the pathway, and you had non-traditional students completing those pathways without additional funding, and that supported CTE programming at the schools. Are we not doing that?
I don't believe so, no.
Well, then maybe we should look into that if that's still okay.
And Tim, you correct me, because you've been in the conversation more than me. If we didn't approve the waiver now, we would be in a position of revisiting some reductions here in April and May of staff late to be able to fit these into the classes going in.
Correct. We would need to.
We would need it, so
We need
we,
to reduce staff, or we would need to reduce electives.
Well,
Staff.
Well,
it's one and the same. We need to find the FTE to teach it, so that has to come out of personnel that are already employed.
Yeah.
So it's both.
we would be reassigning to say you'd been slated to teach this course, this course is.
Yeah.
And stay here teaching this.
Yeah.
Correct.
So none of our CTE pathways are still funding, because I know schools have pathways where they're self-sustaining with the completers funding.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and I don't.
If they complete the whole
Yeah, like,
certification,
the
like
pathway
all
is
of the
the
ones.
resources, or the
Yeah.
courses, yeah.
We paused it though, and,
What do you mean by pause?
like, do another,
Not what
do
did
another meeting.
Even if we're
What?
wrong,
To what end?
because even if we're wrong, and
Then
we are
it's on its
funded,
way.
we still know the bottom line budget that we have.
Right.
And it is where we are, we're in a reduction mode.
And. Sorry, back up. No, it's lost. Because the state is requiring certain components of the personal finance piece.
Correct.
But within our other coursework, do we have finance related? It's not like the kids are totally not getting anything at this point, or that they haven't gotten anything. It's just the state is saying, we want something a little bit more structured.
So students are.
They're not gonna be left in a void. you know.
So, correct, so students are receiving personal finance as a part of the economics course, for example,
Okay.
as we taught at the high school.
Okay.
So there are a couple of weeks that are devoted to personal finance, both at Gresham and at Barlow. As a part of the broader umbrella of economics that students take their senior year. So at one point we were looking at, can we take the standards and push the standards into different courses?
Right.
And by the time the student graduates from high school, be able to demonstrate we've met all of the standards because they've taken these standards here and they've taken these standards here to demonstrate proficiency. The state came back in June this last year and said that doesn't cut it. We want an actual course that says personal finance on the transcript. So there are personal finance concepts that are currently embedded in various places across the curriculum, most of which happen in economics in the student's senior year. The personal finance standards go beyond though what we cover in the 4 to 5 weeks of that personal finance content, which makes sense. The personal finance standards are designed to meet a semester's long course as opposed to just a few weeks.
Okay, but they're not going to have nothing.
Correct.
Okay.
I feel like we should find out why we're not getting this funding and find out like why aren't we have completers that help us get Perkins funding? Especially if we're seeing cuts, that would help us anyway, even if we get over, if we don't find other way.
The Perkins amount of money we get is not. And it's the same, we withdrew some from the consortium, or did we?
It's been a few years.
It's been a few years
We're
since we withdrew.
recipient, and our total
Yep.
budget is about, or our total allocation is 130,000.
Yeah. So barely covers a teacher. And we usually use that money, but I have to go back and look at the budget for equipment, supplies, other things, especially the CTE classes.
Required teams.
Yeah.
I guess maybe Tim, can you talk through, because it looks like the waiver is not required right this moment.
Correct.
So what is the benefit of deciding on the waiver now versus waiting till fall when other dust has settled?
Yes, so to me, the benefit of deciding now before the end of the school year is it gives us the chance to determine if the waiver is not approved or if the board says no to the waiver, then that will impact what we need to do starting in the fall of next year. So that's why the reason we're requesting the waiver now. Because there's gonna be a 2-year implementation process or 2-year implementation cycle. As you take a look at student schedules, for example, if we were to try to squeeze all of this into a student's senior year, both personal finance and the career pathways. The career pathways wouldn't make any sense in a student's senior year, we'd simply be checking with the box. We're trying to make this, the course, valuable and relevant. So it does need to be a 2-year implementation as opposed to simply a 1-year implementation. Is the reason for asking now, knowing the cycle of implementation specifically.
Can you answer one more question for me too? Senior year, they're usually light on credits. What was the discussion related to not having both courses in the senior year?
Yeah, so when you take a look at the content for the career pathways course, it's applying for scholarships, applying to colleges. A lot of those sorts of things that a student would have probably done by the end of their junior year. And so especially if a student were to take that at the end of their senior year, there's very little relevance to the content. To the student specifically.
Not as a reason to approve or not approve this. But I would suggest looking at pushing something else from junior year to senior year, so that junior year seems to be the heaviest. And it's also when they're applying for scholarships and doing all of that stuff. So it's unfortunate to me to add another requirement that year. But maybe there's something that can be moved from junior to senior year. I don't know. I would just look at that, not that that's gonna affect that.
So I know that the counselors have been involved as we've been putting the sequence together. This was their recommendation. There is some flexibility. You are correct. The sophomore year and the junior will be most impacted as far as required courses in between graduation plans. That is. But the counselors felt that within the junior year, there is some flexibility of things that you can make it work best in the junior year. The sophomore year is actually even more full in the junior year, is based on courses that students are trying to take as far as graduation plans.
Tim, were you hearing any resistance from staff? Because I haven't heard any. It's not resistance to the course, it's more about logistics.
Correct. Yeah, it is about logistics. And how we, so the greatest concern around the courses is because the number of credits has not changed and we don't have any more classes that a student can take within their schedule. We have 28 courses or 28 credits that we offer. So the greatest concern is around we are reducing the number of electives that a student has the availability to take within the course of their 4-year sequence. That's where most of the angst comes from, is around there's no hesitation with the content. Personal finance has much stronger support than the pathways. People, as they look at pathways, they say, I understand it. Personal finance people are like, personal finance makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's no hesitation regarding content. It's more about options and choices for students and their ability to make choices around courses that they used to do.
We can get like up to speed on this one. And are you, okay? Basically, what they're saying is if we don't approve the waiver, probably take away some seat.
One last question, and you might not need to answer it now, is we'll have to update KL eventually. Or is it IP, which one, is it IP,
Oh.
graduation requirements?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty much.
That's that's complaint procedure.
Yeah, it's just procedure, I didn't want to forget it, as I said.
Would venture to guess that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the concern is not about implementing them, it's about waiting longer to implement them as opposed to implementing them now. Is there a way that we can approve the waiver but still implement some of the content in other classes, even though that won't? I understand that we can't do that for the state. But can teachers start getting familiar with that content now in some of those other classes that then would become a standalone class, so that it's halfway implemented, but the waiver is still proven?
Of sorts, I would say as far as the career pathways, for example, that's already been embedded within a lot of our health content. So we're able to pull that out of health actually, so the mock interviews that Gresham-Barlow hosted, for example, those are directly aligned with the career pathways, right? So we are doing many of these things spread out in various content areas. What this bill does is it says these need to be one course in one class and one time. So many of these things are being met in various forms, and same thing with personal finance, many of the standards. I don't know if many is the right term, but personal finance standards are being addressed in various courses in various ways. And different courses that students are taking, for example, Avid. Is right on the line with the career pathways, and there's a significant personal finance component for those students that take the Avid class. And I know for, health has been a catch-all for a number of things along the time as well.
So if we don't do the waiver tonight, we still have a little bit of time. If we don't do the waiver at all, then it would mean we have to implement it, and it would mean something else would be cut because of the budget situation. Students would lose options.
Yes,
Okay, that was a qualified yes.
yeah,
Either way,
Well-
students are losing options.
well, and I
Try
guess
not to be too simple with it, but just kind of,
I'm just thinking timeline wise,
uh-huh.
we do have time and the clock is ticking as well. The longer we wait, whether we approve or don't approve the waiver, if we approve the waiver, that leaves us one direction in terms of forecasting and creating our master schedules for next year. If we don't approve the waiver, that leads us a different direction.
And we're not actually approving the waiver, we're approving
We're approving-
submission of the waiver to
Correct.
the state to say whether we can do it. So the longer we wait, then it puts the state at,
I would say
Pressure.
the biggest risk is for our school counselors and our students who are forecasting. That's the biggest reason to not wait.
And Tim, correct me, the one thing I
We're
have
gonna do
heard, and I don't want to give misinformation for sure, is students being forced to take a course as opposed to one that they would have chosen, and having to give it that option does have an impact on motivation and wanting to be there.
However, many students want personal finance.
That's true, many, absolutely.
I mean, I would not
Agreed.
say this is an
Agreed,
unwanted
yeah.
student course,
Agreed.
not from what I've read.
but the question would just be at the expense of somebody
Yeah.
else.
At the expense of.
You know,
Correct.
and that would be the difficult situation, so. Good question, please.
I mean, I guess the other thing is, and I'm sure you guys have already thought about all of these different options, is the classes that we're pulling things out of. Because they have pieces of this, you know, like we said, in health, we're pulling things out of health, so there's gonna be less content in health. Can we push other pieces of that class into something else? Because maybe there's not a requirement that we can't push, so that then that isn't taking up a separate credit. Does that make sense?
Of sorts. So the challenge is that the course has to be a standalone.
For health also,
Yes.
okay.
We can't push health content into the other courses. So health has to be on the transcript, just like these courses have to be on the transcript. I will say that the advantage of being able to pull like the mock interviews out of health. We have a lot of standards to cover in health. So by pulling some of these pieces out, is it does free our health teachers to focus more on health. Unless I'm trying to cover all of these other kind of mishmash things that we to the course. As we go through it. But the course does have to be a standalone on the transcript. Yes.
Usually the chair doesn't make a motion, but I'd be willing to move to approve the submission of the one-year waiver for the Senate Bill 3 graduation. Been moved by Chris, seconded by Holly. Is there further discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Or
Opposed?
Starting post.
David?
What is the posting?
Opposed means no,
Submitting the waiver.
that we're not gonna submit a waiver.
I'm opposed.
All right, so motion fails. So will this be brought back to us then? I'm not sure what other information we would need for this.
I think we'll have to
Yeah.
sort of decide.
Okay. 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 And I think, well, no, okay, all right. So our next item is the postponement of elementary science adoption. And, this has got Dr. Collins, no, it's got Heidi on, it. There we go, I got too far down the line. Dr. Collins dropped the hook, yeah.
So in 2023, science curriculum was on the ODE adoption review cycle for implementation of fall of 2024. But back, when we were adopting math curriculum at elementary level, we engaged in a 2-year process for that, so we postponed our adoption cycle for science. So this year, we have engaged in the, staff have engaged in elementary science curriculum review process. We're currently piloting curriculum this school year. However, given the existing 1 year remaining on our STEM scope subscription, the staff recommends that the board approve submitting a postponement request to the Oregon Department of Education for elementary science curriculum implementation until the 26-27 school year to ensure good budget management. So basically, we engaged in the adoption process. We are piloting instruction materials. We'll make a decision, but delay the purchase and implementation by a year because we have an existing subscription to our current science curriculum.
Is our current science curriculum in consideration for?
It is not. Well, no, yes, it is, but it's updated. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hold on,
I understand.
let me answer that again. ODE did approve a new version of that science curriculum, but it's not one of the 2 that we're piloting.
That because of general dissatisfaction with it?
Yeah, and just overall, what we looked at a bunch of different curriculums and had curriculum presentations and other curriculum were, staff were favoring over our current curriculum.
Anecdotally, when we come up on curriculum adoptions or renewals, how often do we pivot to a different solution?
Well, an adoption is typically 7 years, so it's not uncommon to. We did with reading, we did not with math. For middle and high school, both of our math programs were new. For language arts, both of our language arts programs were new. So it's really what surfaces at the time.
And a lot of publishers make some pretty significant changes to the year too, for new adoptions.
So you have that curriculum for 7 years. Is that same publisher, obviously will update their curriculum and you go look again?
Typically. And some do it mid-cycle, so the irony is a good example of that for math. A few years in, they gather feedback from staff and they make adjustments, and so when we adopted math last time, about halfway through our 7 years, they had a update. That then kind of was more responsive to where teachers were at with that. Not all of them do that. As we get more web-based materials, some of that happens a lot faster because you don't have a textbook that you're needing to replace. So that's kind of part of the shift in the curriculum.
But our language arts curriculum, we adopted the 2020 wonders and they have been updating that curriculum, but we have a 7-year subscription to the 2020 wonders. So they do make changes. But.
Just out of curiosity, when we go from textbooks to web-based. So obviously we're paying for a license. Is it less expensive?
In some cases, yes. And some of our materials have both. Right, they have a text and a web, and so.
Sometimes there's options to print the materials in-house too, some of the text, so that we're not purchasing from the curriculum, the publisher. gives rights to do that, so there's different ways to kind of offset some of that.
And I think that anecdotally, when we just had the textbooks, it was cheaper because we didn't update them for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, there was that in it as well. So, okay, go ahead, John.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think the other factor, so number one, we already have a science curriculum that we've paid for that gets us through next year. So that's one layer of this. I think the other layer of this is you're gonna hear about our health adoption as well. So we have had elementary teachers that have 2 years ago started a new reading program. This year started a new math program. Next year we'll be starting a new health program. So do we want them also doing health and science at the same time? Or do we bump that out a year so there's actually some time to roll those things out more strategically?
Well, it might be beneficial for this conversation when you, because you'd said earlier, staff, you know, it's not one of the two that staff are looking at, or
Correct.
what does that staff review look like? How much of that is classroom teachers at the elementary level? How much of that is administration?
Is classroom teachers, the majority of the group is classroom teachers. From DLI and English instruction classrooms, special education teachers, special education TOSA. Well, there isn't very much administration on the team. And gathering student voice, gathering parent voice, went to conferences, gathering parent voice. Now they're piloting the materials. They finished the first curriculum pilot, and now they're into the second curriculum pilot. That also gives them, they will keep these units, they'll have a couple of units of study from whatever we choose. To potentially practice implementing to bring their expertise to the table when we do decide to purchase and implement.
Any questions? This is also an action item.
I move to approve the submission of a postponement request for the elementary science curriculum implementation until the 2026-2027 school year.
Second.
Been moved by Blake, seconded by David to approve the submission of a postponement request for the elementary science curriculum implementation until the 2026-27 school year. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I'm sure that is unanimous. All right, and now we have a first reading, health adoption, and this has both Dr. Collins and Heidi on it.
Yes,
All right.
we have a slide deck for this.
Yes.
But for this one, the Oregon Department of Education reviewed instructional materials in 2024 and formally recommended materials to meet the needs of district's health classrooms. The materials currently being used are in need of update, and we're gonna go through the different, ODE is not scheduled to review health curriculum again until 2031. We have a slide deck to kind of go through the process that each of our levels.
Yep.
Can we start?
And this is not an action item tonight, this is simply the first reading that we see what we've done so far. So, Sarah, I'll have you click on through. A lot of this will look familiar, because we've taken the same slide deck from previous curriculum adoptions and have used that with this one as well. So, as far as the why, we wanted to make sure that for every curriculum adoption, thinking about culturally responsive graduates who will thrive in an ever-changing global community, that's really a driver for what we're looking at as far as the curriculum is concerned. We want to make sure that it's aligned with GBSC's equity policy. And so we're thinking about how do we make sure that every student with this curriculum is provided with a high quality education, access to materials, and resources that support best practices. So that's really the drivers for us as we went through any sort of curriculum implementation. And also thinking about how it's embedded within the culturally responsive framework. You'll see actually some of that culturally responsive element, some of the student feedback specifically thinking about, do they see themselves in the curriculum? Do they see a connection between the curriculum and their real world lives and those sorts of things? So that's our driver, that's our why behind the work that we do. As far as our non-negotiables are concerned, it is a collaborative process, meaning that we want the teachers and others that are giving feedback to come to agreement and consensus. So it's not just one person driving. And actually with this one of our teachers actually said, did you guys already decide in advance what you're choosing? Like, if that's the case, just let us know. We're like, no, like, this is really a process where we value your feedback. It's collaborative. It's grounded in effective and equitable teaching practices. So for all of these, we take a look at what are the best practices. With health specifically, it's around that practical component. Our students are able to apply what they're learning in a practical sense. Prioritizes the variabilities of our learners. So thinking about how does this material provide access to our students who are more vulnerable? How does this material provide access for students who are on IEPs? So thinking through those lenses specifically as we look at materials. And then finally, center student voice. So we do spend quite a bit of time talking to our students, getting their feedback around what connects with you, what materials allow you to take the ideas and the content and see how those apply and are relevant to you. So those are the things that we walk through with our team, multi-month process. So the next piece. So our middle and high school. As far as centering student voice, Shannon Parvenkin pulled these quotes out from a couple of our students. And I think they're kind of humorous. One student said, "I will never touch drugs. They are nasty. And so are vapes and cigarettes. I want to live my full life." That was one of their responses to seeing one of the pilots that we went through. And then a high school student talked about it's important that we have mental health talk and talk about drug usage. Neither is talked about enough. And once again, that was their reflection based on the pilots as we got their feedback specifically. So really centering student voice in the process. Next. Timeline is something that you've seen before for other adoptions. We start by reviewing the standards, what's required, what's new, what's changed. For health specifically, they've incorporated the transformative social and emotional learning standards into health. So those were some things we took some time to walk through to see how those are connected back to the health standards specifically. Step number 3, we review the materials that ODE had said met the requirements for health curriculum. Invited the publishers to come out and present. And then number 5. Next, there we go. Our teachers identified 2 different curriculums that they thought would work well with our students. We piloted both of those, gathered community feedback, heard from our students and teachers, and then based on that feedback, are making the recommendation for the board tonight. So that's just a brief overview of our topic. Next. So as far as materials, we're looking at GW publishers for our middle school materials, and then Human Kinetics is a publisher for our high schools. Both have a print and an online component that are part of the adoption itself. And with that, even though GW, for example, had both high school and middle school materials, the teachers felt that Human Kinetics, for example, at the high school level, is just a much better package and a much better program. So next. As far as community engagement is concerned, this is just a quick overview. We hosted some open houses. Our instructional coaches went around to a couple of different PTC meetings to get feedback, and also to a 9th grade parent night. So we tried to do community feedback in a slightly different way than we've done in the past. So instead of going to basketball games and those sorts of things, we tried to do a different way to engage our community and get their feedback. Even with that, we didn't get a lot of community feedback around the health curriculum packages, but it wasn't for lack of effort on the part of our adoption team. Yes. Next. This is just talking about the pilot team feedback, so we'll take a look to see really quick. Next. We got student feedback as well, both in the middle school and the high school level. Just wanted to get their thoughts around what was connecting with them specifically. So next. So middle school. Community feedback. People talked about they liked the materials were adaptable to different learning styles that students were bringing to the classroom is the main feedback we heard in the community. For the next one, as far as middle school teacher feedback, they talked about good variety within the courses, thinking about vocabulary is intentional, good scaffolding within the content, integrates well with Canvas, and also this idea of building on the foundational skill-based learning focus of health education. So once again, health is about skill-based education, not just learning content, but learning how to apply the content was what the teachers noticed as part of their feedback and the student feedback. As far as students were concerned, they talked about the fact that this curriculum, they felt like it connected with them. Good stories, good visuals, good vocabulary definitions. The last one I kind of liked that it compared to my life and that I knew what I was doing. So really that strong connection that the students felt are the things that we were looking for from student feedback. High school, fairly similar sorts of ideas. Community feedback, similar. As parents looked, they said it was easy to read, easy to navigate, it felt relevant to what their students should or could be learning. And
Is that
then,
Holly?
no, I don't.
Board meeting,
I think, because that's a Gresham,
wasn't there, that's a Gresham.
it's a Gresham High School in June. As far as pilot teacher feedback, they talked about, they liked that there were many perspectives that were part of the curriculum, graphic organizers and sentence frames. So thinking about how do we address some of our multilingual learners, students on IEPs, thinking about keeping them frames to talk, to respond, to discuss. The students talked about they connected to their own lived experiences, and the accessibility was something, again, that really stood out to the teachers as they looked through human genetics. As far as student feedback goes, next. Same sorts of things you saw at the middle school that the students talked about, easy to follow prompts, things that relate to real life. They felt like the stories made a real world connection with them specifically, easily accessible, concise, easy to follow, same sorts of feedback that we saw for the middle school. And I think that's it. Elementary.
Elementary. So this is our timeline. We gathered a health committee of teachers to review the standards and the general requirements and review the ODE materials that were approved by ODE, which is one curriculum that was approved. We did gather some community and student feedback. We got limited responses from the community, but we did hear from community and students that they appreciated the magazines and the familiarity with the Great Body Shop, which is the one approved curriculum by the state. So our health committee made a decision to move forward with the final decision to present. We will be presenting to you for at our next read, but Great Body Shop was the one and only curriculum, next slide, that was approved by the state and met favorably with our teachers as well. And next slide, these are some of the bullet points as to why we decided to move forward with the Great Body Shop. It's the only curriculum that meets the ODE standards and requirements. Our teachers and families are familiar with and like the materials. Student materials are available in Spanish. It's the only curriculum that was reviewed that was available in Spanish. Student magazines provide physical copies that can be sent home to families, so you can see what students are learning in the classrooms. The online resources are accessible. And the continuity across local school districts, we're all using the same curriculum. And we do have, we can provide professional development on this curriculum in October 2025.
So that's fine.
Some of our favorites.
Yeah, he's pretty excited. So any questions on the presentation?
I think just comment for me and nothing to you guys, but it seems a bit ridiculous that ODE only approves one curriculum. It kind of takes any option. Yeah, that should not be the case. Like it should have to be a mandatory 3 or more, or they shouldn't have a requirement if they're not. That's just very ridiculous to me. So
Is there something in general why they didn't approve, why these others did not meet?
It met our standards.
But it didn't meet ODEs, why does it not? meet
It met ODE, it met, the
She means the other
why did
curriculums.
other
No,
ones
the other
not?
curriculum standard, the other
because it
four.
didn't meet, it didn't follow this ODE standards mainly.
You know what standard it didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know specifically which
Oh,
ones. I do know that staff felt very comfortable with continuing with the same curriculum. For the familiarity, think about it, elementary, we talked about this just a little bit ago, an elementary teacher that has the math curriculum, a language arts curriculum, a potentially a new science curriculum.
Yeah, I like the Great Body Shop. I like that the magazines come home, so it's nothing against the curriculum or the process or the piloting or any of that. It's just
That's why there's only one.
as a
option.
standard.
Yeah, yeah.
For ODE, from ODE, it's like, you can't do that.
There's
You
always
should not be allowed to
to
do
do an
that.
independent adoption, but the committee preferred Great Body Shop over going down that kind of a route.
What would that look like?
An independent adoption, we have to go through that whole process with a different curriculum, find something and go through the whole process that ODE goes through.
With
So
the
it-
guarantee
and then they
probably
would
the
know that,
ODE
yeah.
would approve it.
Yeah,
Well, if you do an independent adoption, you're simply telling ODE that this is what we're doing, and you're telling ODE this is how this curriculum meets the standards in areas that it doesn't, then you tell ODE, these are the other resources it will be using. Then it's different split. So,
Yeah.
to the bigger question, though, I think when you compare like language arts to health, when you take a look, so for example, with the middle school, high school, it's only gonna cost around $200,000 for our health adoption. So if you compare that to our language arts or our math, part of the challenge that ODE has is there's not as much money in health curriculum as opposed to science or math. So there aren't as many publishers that are wanting to have their materials reviewed. So that's part of the challenge as well as the pool is smaller just based on the economics.
What does this renewal cost for health, for elementary?
It'll be around 300 for 7 years.
Okay,
And
and
I-
we would really have an option to not renew because it would discontinue our service and support for that curriculum. Is that what would happen?
Pardon me?
So being as we're functioning with the same curriculum,
We'd lose the license.
Our
Yeah, we would
subscription, we would
lose
have to
Yeah.
purchase yearly, which would be exponentially more than a 7-year.
Or do an independent review. That would be the other options.
But by doing the subscription, we get a discount rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when does this need to come back to us for? Because we're not asking you to do, right?
Yeah, so we'll bring it back the first board meeting in May. We talked to both the publishers of the high school setting. Because we piloted both the middle school and the high school, we already have about half of the textbooks that we were purchasing anyway, because we needed those for the pilot. So the physical materials, half of them are already here. Most of the cost is in the subscriptions to the online components. And so once the board approves, or if the board approves, the turnaround is fairly fast.
If there's other questions, send them our way
Yeah.
between now and our next board meeting.
Again, it's nothing against group homes. I like the Great Body Shop. My kids all went through that. They brought the packets home, so it's just the frustration.
Your point is
One
well taken.
option, even if you wanted to look at others.
Right,
Choose amongst.
it does come across, you use the word
Yeah.
monopoly.
Mhm.
The control thing by ODE, and I don't think they should.
Yeah.
Control.
Okay. Okay, all right, so we're gonna move on to our next item is, just let me make sure here. Update our dual language immersion DLI program, and we have with us this evening, Araceli and Dr. Collins and Heidi. You are welcome to stay for this presentation. You are also welcome to enjoy the beautiful evening and values.
I'm gonna listen to my phone, guys.
Okay.
Quite the scene.
Well, I'm here just for the fun part, right? This is very exciting for me. I think that our district is very excited that we're moving up our program. And well, we started, I don't know if you read the description, we started our program back in 2019. And right now, currently, we have 21 classrooms that are DLI. So this is exciting. We have our logo. This is also very exciting. Now we have a logo. A lot of our districts that have had DLI for many years kind of a logo. So we started looking at logos, and then we send it to the teachers. We send it to our admin. We didn't have time to send it to a lot of people. We send it to our administrators because we had the job fair. It's our first job fair, and so we had to do all of the everything for our job fair. So that is our logo, and it's in English and in Spanish, and it has the world, because that's what we're trying to do, right? Create citizens who are more conscious of the world that they live in today. And the first job fair, I thought that it was not gonna be that successful, because it is hard to hire people who speak both languages. So we said, okay, we'll do it, and we did it, and we had over 12 people attend our DLI job fair. And a lot of them were very highly qualified. So now we've posted our positions and we are sending them the links so they can apply. So we won't have, hopefully, a problem this year hiring the teachers that we need for our elementary schools and for our middle school. Next slide, please. Yes. Well, you already know the why. I mean, other times that I've been and I presented that, right? Our district is very diverse. 26% of our students are ever English learners. And the population at those schools, that's why we chose those sites when we did, right? At Highland is 57% Hispanic or Latino, 43% of them are ever English learners. So it was better to teach those students in their native language, right, and support them to learn English. And also adding the community that speaks English so that they can enrich their linguistic repertoire by adding another language, right? So it's a win-win for the entire community. North Gresham, we started the next one, and you can see also the high population of Hispanics or Latinos and the 38% ever English learners. We cannot staff those buildings with all of the EML teachers that they need. So if we're teaching those kids in their native language and teaching in English as well, I mean, it's a easier way for us to close the achievement gap that we historically have had between our EMLs and our English speakers. And then we're moving on to Clear Creek next year at the middle school. And as you can see, the population there is also very high, 46% Hispanic, 35% ever English learners. And then we're moving on to Gresham High School, 44% Hispanic or Latino, 38% ever English learners, and 70% to 80% of all of our EMLs are Spanish speakers. So that's why we decided to start our ELI program in Spanish be the target language. Next slide, please. As you can see, our population of students was pretty steady. This is a count for the past 10 years. I mean, we had between 1,300, 1,400. And then you can see in 2021, we had 1,300, and then for the past 4 years, and that's when I started back in 2021. And now we've added almost 500 students in the past 4 years, 500 students to our program. So this is a program designed to support all of these students, right? So next slide, please. These are our recent arrivals for the last 10 years, right? We've had an increase. If you can see, I mean, we used to have 79 back in 14, 15, and now we have 418 recent arrival students that come from other countries. And the first 3 years that they're in our country, they are recent arrivals. So we have 600% increase. And not all of our recent arrivals need language support. Some of them come from countries that English is in their language of instruction. But 530% of them do need language support. So this is a very good way to continue to support their language while they're learning another language.
What is the difference between newcomers and recent arrivals?
Well, we use them as, some recent arrivals do not need language support if they come from a country where their language, like the Philippines, right? Their language of instruction is English. They speak Tagalog and they speak other languages, but their language of instruction is English. So when they come to us, they're recent arrivals in the sense that they are moving to our country, but they do not need the language support. So they wouldn't go to the newcomer program where we are supporting them learn English. So they already know English, right? So we have, you can see a little bit of a difference of 527 right now. That's how many recent arrivals we have in our school district, but only 418 of them need language support.
Are all 418 of these students then also considered newcomers?
Yes, yeah, the newcomers are the 418,
Okay,
and
so
that's
recent arrival ELL would be interchangeable with newcomer. Okay. Thank you.
I had the opportunity to visit Polydale for Spanish speaking, had the opportunity to
Highland and North Elementary.
Highland. What a program. I mean, just flourishing, happy, smiling. It's awesome. to see.
Thank you. It is very exciting to have those programs.
I think John took me there on purpose.
But
I don't know if you remember these, but these are the three pillars for our DLI program. And it's bilingual and biliteracy. They're not only speaking the language, but also reading and writing in Spanish and English, right? All of our students are proficient in reading and writing in both languages. The second pillar is a high academic achievement in both languages. So all students in all content and subject areas, not only the language, but also math and reading, writing, science, everything is in both languages. And the social cultural component, those students are more critical conscious and they're global citizens. They are exposed to a lot of other different cultures and a lot of other different languages, because we not only have Spanish speakers and English speakers, we have students who within our program speak another language, that speak Russian or speak Portuguese, and so they want to learn Spanish as well. So they're trilingual or multilingual. And so those are the three pillars, and we want to make sure, because people focus more on the bilingual, biliterate, right, and high academic achievement, but we also focus on the social cultural component of the program. And this is the DLI vision and statement. Our dual language immersion program is committed to graduating bicultural and biliterate students who sustain high levels of academic achievement in both languages, and are also social cultural competent individuals who will thrive in a never-changing global community. So that is in with our mission and vision statement from our district. A quick reminder of the why, the research, right? The dual language bilingual education, that's how the New Mexico, we've been working with New Mexico, and that's how they defined it, right? We don't want to forget bilingual, because we used to have bilingual education. Now it's called dual education. Bilingual, it was just one way. All speakers of one language, let's say Spanish, were learning English. And in our program, dual means both languages, right? Students who speak English and students who speak Spanish are learning both languages. So our dual program is the most effective service model for EMLs. If we pull them out, it's kind of like segregating, right? And if we put all students together who do not speak the language, they won't learn from each other because they don't have language models. Right, and I consider myself a language learner, and I will always be a language learner. And I have colleagues, right, who learn English like me, that learn at later age, and I won't learn anything from them, right? If I talk to Josefina, one of my colleagues, I'm not gonna learn anything from Josefina, but then I go and talk to Tracy, or I hear Heidi, and I'm like, what? Oh, you're using that in that way, and what, how, okay, so now I get it. So if we don't segregate our students and pull them all out, right, if we have them in an environment where they have language models, they learn better. And there's a link right there, right, if you want to take a look at that. And those are research-based, the language guidelines that we're using. So that's the research base. The students that we're serving in DLI, currently we're serving 483 students in kinder through 5th grade. Multilingual learners, 1,104 in K-5, right? Out of those, 259, 24% of them are in DLI. Currently, at the secondary level, we have 247 newcomers in grades in secondary K 6-12. And these students could be serving DLI. So we couldn't expand, fast enough. In our results, and I think that Heidi already presented those results to you, we're closing the gap, and we see it in DLI at a faster rate than in our other schools, our EMLs compared to the rest of the district, right? We're closing the gap in DLI at a faster rate than in the rest of the schools in our district. Next slide. And this is in preparation for Clear Creek Middle School. They're preparing to receive about 50 students in September of 2025. Only 2 classes, only from one building. The next year they will be receiving close to 100 students, because it would be 2 and 2. Oh no, 3 classrooms, because we only have 1 classroom moving up this year. Three classrooms, 75, and then after that, it's gonna be 4 the year after that. But that is our team, and we've been working with dual language education of New Mexico for a couple of years. So we've been talking to them, they've been here with us, and this is the whole team from middle school. And we've had a couple, 2, 3 trainings. We received coaching from them. If you have any questions, we've been very intentional in preparing the staffs at Clear Creek, and they're all on board, and they all understand our mission, and they all understand their students, and they all see a need for this program specifically in that building. Underway, the foundations, right? We're preparing the environment. Like we said, we've been working with this community for a year. And we started before that, but with that community, we've been preparing for a year. Curriculum, we've chosen the classes, the content classes that we're gonna be teaching. We've revised the curriculum. We are ready. We're partnering with other districts that have been doing this for 20 years, Salem, Kaiser. And they're supporting us with language arts. So our coaches are meeting with their coaches and so to learn, and they have researchers that come with them, Dr. Escamilla, Dr. Jose Medina, and they're working with them, and they're inviting us to work with them. So we are already working in our curriculum for the next year. The class schedule, we are making sure that we have all the students that we need for all the class sections that they're gonna be teaching in middle school. And the newcomers next year are going to be attending Clear Creek instead of going to Dexter. Right now, we have them at Dexter for 1 year, and after that, they go back to their neighborhood school. But when they go to the newcomer program, they're gonna have we're gonna invite them in the families one, they can stay with us and they can finish their 6th through, until they graduate from high school, they can stay with us. And then we've been recruiting families very intentionally. There's other students that are not in our DLI program and they are heritage speakers. So we go and we talk to the family specifically for the feeder schools, just the feeder schools, North, 5th grade at North, Highland, the 2 5th grade classes, right? And then Hollyville. And we're asking the families, we're interviewing the students, we're seeing if the students have the language skills to be in our DLI program. So we've recruited families to join our program, and we have about 50 students that are gonna be in our program. And we will
explain what heritage speakers are.
Well, heritage speakers is students who have been in our country all their lives. I don't mind if you, Mayra is a heritage speaker of Spanish, right? She grew up in this country, but her family spoke Spanish at home. So those are the population that we're going after. Sometimes they lose their Spanish and they lose themselves. It's not only the language, it is your identity. Language has a lot to do with who you are and your identity. So we are recruiting from heritage speakers. And we're collaborating with the whole staff. We meet every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks virtually we meet, and then the principal, the assistant principal, our team, some coaches. So when we all talk and try to solve all the things that we think are gonna come out next year. But it has been very uplifting. Everybody's on board, everybody's doing what we're supposed to be doing. So hopefully we'll be there next year. And then we're also preparing Gresham High School. We have a couple of teachers in Gresham that want to teach in Spanish, and they've been wanting to teach in Spanish since last year. And this year, I mean, we said last year, we said, no, let's give us another year, and this year, they're on board and they wanna do it. So we said, we have 120 newcomers at Gresham High School right now, and we have to shelter instruction in different content areas. So for next year, we're gonna offer 2 classes in Spanish to support our newcomer program in Gresham High School. Next slide. So we're gonna be teaching algebra, freshmen, newcomers who need algebra, and biology for juniors or seniors, possibly sophomores, depending on the student and what they're needing. We're also assessing their language skills, right? Their language proficiency. And we have a team, we have a couple of teachers, we have our coordinator supporting all these efforts. And we have Margarita Dal, our DLI instructional coach, also supporting this process. And we work very closely with Tim. We talk to Tim, and so we are offering those 2 classes, and also language arts. And language arts is for heritage speakers, right? Students who speak Spanish at home. And this is also for newcomers that come from Spanish-speaking countries. So we are going to also be giving them credit for the language arts. This is with access to linguistic inclusion as well. But they will, I mean, could potentially be receiving 3 classes in Spanish. And this is how we prioritize students. We first, from Spanish speaking and simultaneous bilingual students from neighborhood schools. That would be the first priority, Spanish speakers, newcomers from any school in our district. And the district, we provide transportation because we know, I mean, how important it is to have those students and support them. Heritage Spanish speakers from the neighborhood schools. We also are inviting them. And then English speaking DLI students from our neighborhood 3 schools that we have, right? The Spanish speaking students from other schools in our districts, if their families want to, but they must transport them. We won't be able to transport them. Heritage Spanish speakers from other schools in our district and their families need to transport them. And then English speaking DLI students from other schools in our district, and they provide transportation. And the last one is students outside of our district with a transfer, and the family must provide transportation. And we assess the language of all of these students to make sure that they can, I mean, handle the classes that they're going to be taking in Spanish.
Our students who are currently in Highland or North Gresham programs that would matriculate into it are they sort of reevaluated in the lottery, or
No.
students are already participating, they're gonna matriculate it? Okay.
Yeah.
These are just for new.
Yeah, these are just for the ones that we're trying to recruit from our heritage Spanish speakers or newcomers. And newcomers, of course, they have the language because they come from Spanish-speaking countries.
And I'm the English language learner here.
It's a public, right, matricularse, it's a public. Same thing in Spanish. And then these are things that we were thinking about our expansion. Right, our newcomers, like I said, they're not going to Dexter, they're going to go to Clear Creek now. And starting in next year, they're gonna be sending them to Clear Creek. And then newcomer high school already go to Gresham High School instead of Barlow, unless they opt out of our program. Now, in addition to the support of the newcomer program, Spanish speakers will have access to the core content classes that I was telling you about, the 2 classes and the heritage Spanish, so 3 classes in Spanish. And students who enroll in DLI program as newcomers have guaranteed transportation through 12th grade, right? Because that's what the district is going to do to support the newcomers. Next slide. And this is the last slide, and this is, this is what we've been trying to do, right? Does everybody know what DLI is? And so we've been talking to our liaisons. Our liaisons have been working with us since we started the program, but I mean, we're still talking to them. Today, we gave them the posters, so they're gonna go and post them at in La Tapatía, in different places where our families can see it. So we work very closely with the liaisons. Our EML teachers are the ones that identify and test our students and tell us if they're newcomers. So we send them to the schools that they have to go to. Our counselors, we had a meeting because we have to translate transcripts when they come from other countries. So we had a meeting today just about with counselors, with our newcomer counselor. And she was telling us, okay, we need to do this, we need to do this, and this is how we're gonna prepare. And we have the interpreters who's interpreting these transfers and how are we doing it? It is a lot of work. The principal is super involved and the assistant principal, they've been amazing. At the middle school, and we always get together with elementary principals as well. Every week I meet with the elementary principals. And yeah, we talk about the newcomer referral process, and it is pretty. We have it step by step, and we talk to the secretaries, because it is very important. They're the first people who receive our newcomers. So this is very exciting. Any questions?
Just to see it in action, it's kind of, seriously, it's opened my eyes to. You know, you can only imagine that a student who barely speaks English that gets put into a classroom of all English speaking, and they're not going to flourish as well as if they're in spring.
And 100% of our students in that class, 100% of them are language learners. They're either learning English or learning Spanish. So everybody's talking, and even if they don't understand each other, they just talk.
That is also accurate.
So I have a question, I don't know, it's not related to DLI, it's more about the numbers. With the increase of newcomers, or regional levels to the district, and then all of them going to Gresham High. How are you doing with the space in it?
The FTE is there, it's allocated in the building, the space. I mean, there's adequate number of classrooms, we're fitting everybody in. The real challenge is they're not in their home school. And the challenge also is Gresham High is the hub of many programs. So master scheduling is difficult. You have singletons all through that master schedule. It makes it very difficult for kids to get classes they want at times of day that they want, because we're always trying to put in those one-offs or two-offs. So that's a challenge. Expanding the program to Barlow eventually, we've talked about this. It seems like a reasonable thing to do. That's an FTE thing as well. So.
And we're also doing the sheltering, right? Leah and Amy have been great at, doing PD for all teachers. Sure, I mean, everybody's responsible for our newcomers, so we're trying to do more sheltering, right? Because our teachers do not know how to shelter the language for our kids, and I'm not a language teacher. Everybody is a language teacher. Everybody is supporting our newcomers. So how can we better support our teachers with PD on sheltering instruction? How do you shelter?
I think that's why those 3 classes at the high school for next year are such a big.
Oh, I know, when I got
Improvement for
newcomers,
us,
we
right?
had a lot of kids fail algebra and fail science,
know.
and then they wouldn't graduate on time because we weren't scaffolding teachers, not all teachers were scaffolding and providing shelter instruction. It was ours, it was a newcomer team responsibility.
And I haven't looked at the master schedule, but just on the surface there, that looks like it will do a great deal to free up the schedule. So kids will have more options just by doing that.
And be able to graduate on time.
And I think part of that for us was the relief that having our elementary Spanish speaking newcomers go to Highland, the relief that gave us in newcomers. It's like, we can't wait. If we have teachers at the high school that are ready, we need to jump there now. Let middle school do its thing and start to absorb some of those Spanish speakers from the middle school level. But it's been an amazing process, and I just wanna shout out to Araceli here. When she was like presenting that slide about doing, a DLI job fair, like those first years, we were like, are we gonna have a teacher? And, because of a lot of the collaboration that she and her team does across the state, like people are coming to us. And so kudos for just amazing work. And remember, the first year of this was 1920. So kindergartners started English and Spanish and then ended that year in a pandemic. It started at North online, right? So it's pretty exciting that we're seeing the growth that we're seeing, even with all of those circumstances with these kids that are now upper elementary and headed to middle school. Like,
Ours always been just making.
It's a long time.
Education.
And now other districts are coming to observe us. Next week, we have David Douglas, and they're gonna be coming to observe our program. So it's like we used to go, and we still do, we go and visit other districts, but now they're, and we're like, oh, okay, you can come and visit us, yes.
And I think that's important to note that other districts have supposedly had a DLI program for 20, 30 years.
And
And
they
they
won't.
never made it out of elementary. And the fact that Gresham-Barlow is already studying at the high school, that's very impressive.
One, added to that, I mean, if you pair our literacy efforts with this, part of the reason we're seeing these results in year 3, and we're seeing a lot of positives right now, it tells me that next year I will hope for how far we're gonna come. This is really an effective pairing of instruction too. Kids are getting what they need, particularly literacy wise.
And I think it's also like, shout out to the whole team, right? Just in terms of the collaboration with Heidi and Tim, the collaboration with principals, trying to just figure out how do we really support folks? How do we figure out this curriculum thing? How do we hold a hard line? You know.
I think that the other thing that's exciting is we also have student teachers now within our DLI program who will be able to hire, which I think is super exciting. So not only do we have the job fair, but we also have people in the pipeline who have run up in the district, who will now get their teaching license and start teaching for us, which is incredibly helpful.
Something we were all very close to.
Should I ask a dangerous question?
Sure.
Do our bargaining contracts support the importance of those positions and the specific skills that it takes to teach in those positions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so retention would not be a concern.
We
Yeah,
actually
we just bargained. Sorry, I'm gonna say it.
Yeah.
We offer a stipend for our teachers who teach in the DLI program. As well as,
The concern would be last in, first out type of situations.
Oh, there's new laws that kind of help us to protect. Any staff member that brings either a cultural perspective or I don't remember what the language is in the law, but it does allow us to use special programs as a way to retain. That would kind of supersede seniority.
To be pretty honest though, we talked a lot in cabinet and ILT as we were going through the budget reduction process. Still, our staff who were newer, and then that many of our staff of color are newer. They were impacted more than others, even though we worked hard to make sure it didn't or avoid it happening. The contract still does have some implications for that, but there are some laws protecting.
And for our DLI classrooms, it's required that they speak Spanish. And so you can't bump into that classroom
Correct.
if you're not
Okay.
fully fluent in the language of instruction.
That's a very logical thing to do.
Yeah, I-
It's still worthy of the question
Yes.
sometimes.
But it is part of the job description. So
Yes.
when we hire, you actually hire stating this job requires that you speak the language of instruction. And so even in these bumping scenarios, if you don't speak the language of instruction, you can't bump into that position.
And all but 2 are bicultural and bilingual, I mean, people of color. All of our staff that works in DLI, they're all people of color.
My last comment is disconnected from this program that I think it's so wonderful, because I think language instruction is so wonderful, and I think global language instruction is so wonderful. A lot of the same defenses that we use to advance DLI, we go dead silent on when we reduce our foreign language opportunities at the high school level. And that I will continue to voice that's a disappointment, not just from me, but from the community. We're cutting, we have less language offerings than 30 years ago. So high schools. Spanish, yes.
We used to have French, we used to have,
Well, we have French currently, it's getting dropped.
Used to have German.
it was restricted pretty far back. I remember when Anthony was there, that it got cut pretty seriously.
Well, in 2003, it was still live in all world.
At Barlow. Not Gresham.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will just voice, we talked
Yeah,
about.
no, I agree with you.
graduate,
No, I agree with
We
you. I
have
agree with you.
2 languages, one of them is not actually communicated outside the United States,
Uh-huh.
so we have Spanish.
And doesn't always qualify for college credit for foreign language because it's not foreign.
I don't know if this is off topic or not, but iOS 19, when they do the update on Apple, you're gonna be able to wear your AirPods.
Yeah.
And speak different languages to each other.
Oh, it's cheating, like you can't do
But no,
that.
what I'm saying is.
The article that I read was Star Trek is here,
Yeah.
basically. Mhm.
I looked at that, and I went, wow.
That is true.
Mhm.
So I've been talking to Tracy and they said that the next dual language program should be Russian, because that's the second population that we have. So if we, or when we open up another one, it would be Russian for us. I mean, our population, that's what our population is, Spanish and Russian.
Any other questions? All right. We do have another agenda item coming up. I will offer the a brief moment. Let's take a brief 5-minute recess.
What is that point?
I stayed for
was like, oh, I'll teach you Spanish at home, like, take notes, take interpret, take.
All right, good evening. Are we back? On the line?
Yeah.
All right, we are back. Continuing our agenda for April 16th, 2025, regular board work session. We are up to facility field use policy and procedure. Dr. Sarah DeBoy.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we will be talking just about some of the updates that have happened since this policy was adopted in November, last November, or November 2023, I believe. I have it in here.
November 1st.
For our board conditions, this actually touches both on safety and belonging. Obviously, a lot of our facility and field use, types of requirements in our guidebooks have to do with safety, and we also believe in the community aspects of this policy and how it impacts belonging. So, this should be familiar to you. This is just a piece of policy KG adopted November 2023. But basically, this was the policy that stated that the interests of our educational programs and also our community and taxpayers need to really be thinking about that use of school district buildings and grounds and having the priority of those best interests. So we were directed as a district to create that set of regulations that really applied to all of that. So an AR was developed alongside it. And then this year, we implemented it, and like with anything, once you implement something, you learn, oh, that needs a little tweak, or maybe that's not working the way we intended. So we sort of watched and listened, and have had a lot of conversations. It's been really great, actually. Got to meet a lot of our community partners and worked really closely with Terry Taylor and Ed Blaschke, who schedules all of these things, and what are you hearing, seeing. So these are some of the changes and updates that we've made to the AR, only the policy, of course, does not get changed. The first one is that we had some conversation about how the softball and baseball turf fields were at the same rate as the stadium. And we decided that the stadium is really a much bigger, more extensive rental, so the cost should not be the same. So we've lowered the costs for renting softball and baseball. Pretty logical. We also decided to lower the requirement for our tier 2 users to 80%, previously 90% GBSD students. And that was because some of the tier 2 groups are quite small. So if you only have 40 kids, for example, once you had 4, you were bumped to tier 3, which is a big price jump. It goes from 30% of the full cost to 70% of the full cost. So, pardon me?
That is a big jump.
It is a big jump. So we really wanted to be really thoughtful to that we have some of those tier 2 user groups that are smaller groups, and we didn't want to penalize them so heavily, and we kind of worked the math to figure out what would happen, and decided to make that change. In turn, we raised the requirement for our tier 1 users who do not pay a fee to be 100% GBSD students. This is in alignment with our other districts. I've read a lot of policy on field use in our surrounding districts and districts in the metro area. And also, it's just descriptive of our tier 1 groups. When we started talking about it, I'm like, well, is that all of our kids? And it'd be like, well, yeah. So it really just made sense, but it also makes it really clear that who those groups in tier 1 that would be using fields and facilities in charge would be. I also want to put a caveat in here that they still, even as a tier 1 group, may have to pay for things like custodial or monitor, but they're not charged for the use of the facility. We also made it really clear within the AR that tier 1 groups playing out of season will incur tier 2 fees. That way we don't have tier 1 groups that dominate a field all year long, because we'll have other tier 1 groups that need to get on there in season. And we've been able to issue keys and possibly a limited badge for facility access in really exceptional circumstances, but that facility would be contained, such as the hitting facility would be an example. It wouldn't be a badge into a whole entire school. And it really just depends. So we're being careful about that. We're taking it case by case and doing a deposit that's refundable at the end with our keys, because less money, and we want people to be responsible with them. Then
Can I ask,
sure,
just real quick before you move on, number 4,
yes,
what season is that based on, like OSAA seasons?
yeah, so based on like, whatever
Youth sports don't
our,
necessarily follow OSAA seasons is why I asked.
right, it really is mostly dependent on our teams, our school teams' use of fields. And making sure that
Oh,
that's not interrupted, so it falls in line with the policy.
Got it.
But we also know that there are soccer clubs that are literally they're year round. Lots of clubs like that, so we just wanted to make sure that there was also equal opportunity for other people to get on the field, whether they were our junior leagues or not.
Got
The next is just a little changes to the AR to just be more descriptive and incorporate some of our updates of who these different groups are. Tier 1, I think when you see this level includes is the most helpful statement we started adding. I can't remember whose policy gave us that idea, but it helps a lot to see, okay, who's in this group so I can get an idea of which one I fit. So our community partners like Sun, for example, our district and school sponsored activities, our endorsed youth programs, they're all tier 1. And they have additional requirements to provide scholarships for youth and to support field maintenance and debris removal. So being out there when they're done, picking up the garbage, helping out with our field maintenance, that's tier 1 in a nutshell. Tier 2, the noted change there to 80%. This is people that are predominantly serving GVSD youth that are youth leagues and scouts and 4-H and such, and also nonprofit youth leagues that are just not district or school sponsored. Now, jumping up to tier 3, this is more private schools, nonprofit youth organizations that have fewer than that 80%, adult rec groups and organizations, things like that. And finally, tier 4, these are private parties. A perfect example would be like the Blazers. They have run programs out of our buildings before. They're a tier 4 user. If they're a commercial organization or, and then it would be political organizations as well.
One question on this slide, how do groups show that they are GVSD endorsed youth program?
That's actually in the commonly asked questions. And the way that they do it is they have to provide a roster of everybody participating in their program and provide, addresses that's with that. And then actually we have people that are so amazing at this, like they can just look and be like, yes, 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 yes. I don't know, just keep going. And then be able to look further into kids. And if they know already that they're out of district, which is really helpful, they just write it on there, but sometimes you don't know.
Yeah.
So we work closely with the user group too, but they have to provide us a roster if you're one of those groups. Good question. The next is just a graphic through the end of March of who have our user groups been. And I feel like this is an important graphic because whenever you have a big change like this, that's not necessarily super popular. There can be interesting rumors that go around, and one that came back to us was that we were canceling tier 1 and tier 2 reservations so we could have more tier 4 groups because we make money off of those. We've had 3 tier 4 user groups this whole time to this point. We absolutely, I want to make it really clear, prioritize the programs that serve Gresham-Barlow School District youth. And as you can see, tier 1 is our largest, more than half, 57% of our kids, and that's no fee. And that's not like our high school teams, it's our tier 1 users. So just making it really clear who these people have been. And it's just interesting to see how they fall. There's not a lot of users in tier 2. So it's been interesting, and this may change over time as people are kind of acclimating to all of the changes happening this year.
I had some very voiced concerns at the chamber meeting a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
No, it was not because of that. It was, I used to get this stuff for free all the time. Why are we being charged?
Yeah, it's been a lot of patient understanding conversations on my part, because I know and Terry's and Janet's and John's and a bunch of people, because it is a little abrupt, and there is something written into our policy that our superintendent can, on a case-by-case basis, kind of considers special situations. Example, we have a charitable organization that comes every year that raises money. It's a wheelchair rugby team, and they end up in the tier 3 bucket, obviously, and they were seeing a huge, they were paying before, but now it was a lot more. So things like, well, for a charitable organization, can we do some sort of a step-up plan in the first year? People have been wonderful.
Yeah, and they were willing.
They're
Just that
willing to pay the
example,
whole thing.
They wanted to pay
Yeah.
the full thing, it's just that surprise there, they hadn't budgeted for that,
Yeah.
so you make an exception, you grandfather, and then you work it out.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
we've only
possible
done that
to do it.
once this year. It's
Yep.
really rare, but sometimes it just makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Also, things that we're doing is helping people understand how their reservation can mess them up unintentionally. So example, talking to some of our church groups that are using our buildings and saying, okay, let's really talk about all the rooms you actually need and are using, because are you inflating your cost when you don't need to? Let's really talk about what you need, and that's actually gone very well. People have been very, very understanding. Just so you know, a side note on this is our total invoicing to this, the end of March was about $60,000. So we're not making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, because most of our users are tier 1. And most people use it once, not on, and they use it for a few hours. So we do a lot of penciling things out and helping people with that. I also had, for example, a tier 2 softball user group that wanted to block out every Saturday, Sunday, 2 fields from 12 to 8 and the hitting facility. And I was like, whoa, so let's talk, like, when are you actually intending to use it? And instead of just holding it so that you have the flexibility to come in, you're gonna need to say, I'm gonna be here at this time. And that's reasonable and helpful once they did that.
So how, when those fees come in,
Mhm.
is turf field use then set aside for turf replacement fund? Or does it all go into the bucket?
It should be, but I don't know the answer to that right now, because I haven't gotten that far.
It's definitely coded in a specific way, so
Yes.
that's how I
Depending
know.
on field or?
And just on the facility use in general, so that we'll know, that's how I know about how much we've invoiced and how much we're making, because it's, Janet handles that keeping, but. And also up through the business office, of course, they have a way of seeing, but in terms of how it's set aside, I'm unsure. That's
Yeah,
I'll get the answer for you there.
our business office keeps.
part of that is just me wanting to make sure I'm saying accurate, because
Yes.
I'm connected with a lot of those communities,
Yeah.
and I've heard it, and my message has been consistent. We have these beautiful new facilities, and if we want our children's children to have beautiful facilities, then we need to pay for the use of those facilities, or it's gonna go away in a generation.
They do cost to maintain and
Yeah,
keep and.
Absolutely.
There's a couple of groups that I have a feeling as we continue to say no, it's just 1 or 2. That would prefer that they have preference over our students at different times of the year. Even like stage and concerts, and that's not gonna happen, and they don't understand. That we've given you our dates in February or March, why can't you make this work? Well, because the play is happening when you wanna do this, we can't take the stage up and down to do that, even if you give us the dates in advance. So
Yeah,
we're having some of those conversations, and the kids in the building do come first.
so as mentioned, these are some of the common questions that I'm getting that kind of falls in line, probably some of the things you're carrying. So I've had questions about, what about donations that are monetary? Like, we donated this much money, can that be credited towards our reservation? No. Can we, you know,
Right, it's not a donation.
we actually bought all of this equipment, and so usually my way of explaining it, the kindest way I can is to say, really appreciate the donation, first of all, that's amazing, and thank you for doing that for our student athletes or our student performers. And I'll give you an example, if a person came into my school when I was a principal and said, I want to donate 25 laptops, I would say, that's awesome, thank you so much. I would not expect that person to turn around and say, so I can come and use your computer lab anytime I want, right? But that's not how donation works. And I realized that there were old rules and old ways of doing things, but one of the biggest problems with that is we have Title IX regulations around donations, where we are really supposed to be making sure there's parity between programs, and it's really easy for that to get out of whack. You have to monitor it really, really closely and make sure that there is parity and equality in those programs across the board. So we have Title IX agreements around it. There's laws around it, so it's a shift, and we're just trying to be just step by step with people. We got a lot of questions about county checkout keys. I've already addressed that, yes. How we show our proof of our 80%. And then this is a recent question. Is there a chance our reservation can be bumped? Yes. But you usually would only get bumped if a game has to be moved to a different place that is like our own high schools or our own playing their own games. You're not gonna get bumped by another tier 2 user because you're tier 3. It's not like a hierarchy except for our own high schools and our own students' programs. So if they have to move a game, which happens sometimes, our athletic directors were talking about hair situations. Are we then rescheduled? If it can be, absolutely, we'll work with you to reschedule, and if it can't be, you're not billed for that time. They don't bill until the end of the reservation, so then they count up how much use you actually had. So if you had to cancel, or if you had to, you were bumped and you had to not be there, then you don't get billed for that. So, yeah.
Could I ask the parallel question of what's the cancellation policy? How long do users have to?
I think it's written in our user guide, and I think
I would
it's
just be worried about,
24 to 48 or something. I need to look.
because that's unique to bill at the end.
Yeah.
Usually people are billed up front,
Mhm.
and then if they cancel,
Yes.
it's on their shoulders if they don't meet your policy.
I have
Yeah.
asked. And I do want to make sure that does happen. We need to bill up front.
Yeah, we
That's it.
haven't been to this point, and I think it was because, maybe it's because of the novelty of this and just making sure that we're being fair and not overcharging. And it is, reimbursements are not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. I think also there's just been, because it's kind of been this open door, there's just been so much leeway on timing. So I had a group tell me, well, I just work, whenever the coach for that school is going to be on the field, they let me know, and then I come in around them, and so we just had to tighten things up a lot. Like if you were to reserve a space for your birthday party, you'd say this hour to this hour, and when I can come in and I have to be out, and it's the same exact thing.
This is really encouraging to hear, and thank you for all the hard work.
Oh, of course.
As a little side, checking out keys, the easiest district I've ever worked with is Oregon Trail,
Oh, really?
and they have a badging system.
Yeah.
So the
You can
key is
turn it on.
behind a badge, so you know exactly who has it,
Right.
and then it's air tagged, and so.
Yeah, we still do have some physical keys to our gates and to the fields and
Yeah.
things, but the
Most of it's
badging,
badge.
we can track all of that. And in fact, just say, I guess it's good for the public to know that when people are using their badges or they're not being used appropriately, we can track all of that. And because we are so thoughtful about energy conservation, they see a weird anomaly, like, why is the air conditioning on that whole day? Or what happened here? And they just track that, and then we check it out and see what happened and who's using the facilities.
Added to this, because part of my conversations with you two, what brought a few things to my attention, like, okay, this isn't working right now, and why? When we forwarded the first AR, we thought it was good. Brought it forward, gave it to all of you. I do think this one is better as we arrange it, and we're still gonna be learning something. There's something that we missed, so I have to know, we have to know. And my next question was more like Sarah, is, the new AR, have we gotten that posted yet, or is that something we need to?
It was submitted, correct,
Yeah,
Sarah,
it hasn't
right?
been.
It hasn't posted yet because I checked earlier today,
Okay.
but it takes them a minute. Is it OSBA that uploads
It's
it?
OSBA, yeah, it can.
It
take
takes,
it, yeah.
takes time for them to get it up there, but we can certainly make copies of that so that you have access and you can
If
see it.
we could, and then we can put it on the facilities website,
Yeah.
what most people want
That's
to do
good,
is scheduling.
that's good. Yeah.
And the other question is, how are we pushing the new one out? Cause I know we have meetings by season, or at least Janet does. How is this information getting out to people?
Well, in terms of some of the changes, I mean, those have been fairly recently because it wasn't until really we hit spring sports that some of these came up a little bit more. So I think that what we've been trying to do, I know there's been meetings for our coaches in the past to help scheduling in the spring. There's been different things like that, but the first step was really just making our ADs really aware. Because the other thing that people don't know is reservations start at a school level, because they manage who's in and who's out, because they know what their own kids are doing. And then that goes to facilities. Now, you can still call facilities first and they'll help you figure out how to do this and what you need. But really, it's like someone like Tahana over at GHS that's figuring out that schedule. So I've also had personal conversations with those amazing assistants on, here's some things that we know have happened that can't happen anymore, and here's why, and let's talk about it, and what's your schedule looking like? So it's a learning process, but we wanted to start with ADs and then those athletic secretaries, because really athletics is mostly the issue, not so much our performing spaces.
My question was gonna be on rollout of the information. I have a husband who coaches, just saying that. And you know, he does, coaches submit their time for their, you know, practices and things like that, but if they don't know kind of the next step in that process,
Yeah.
they might not know that they need to submit some other times, like if they're doing a youth clinic, or if they're doing a youth camp in the summer or whatever, so I think we can do some work on the rollout of who knows, and then how we're giving them that information, as well as a lot of the youth organizations that use our facilities. The sooner that they know that these things are coming,
Yeah.
the easier it is.
Totally agree. And we know even with the new policy, there was an attempt to do lots of communication. People sometimes don't pay attention until it's actually hitting them personally, and they're like, wait, what? I didn't know about this. But we just need to communicate it as many ways as we can. I think adding it to the website, since it's a good idea. And honestly, Janet and our athletic secretaries have to just be well versed in the process. So when people call, they said, oh, have you filled out an application with facilities? You know, back and forth.
My only hesitancy in that is that I know how it's been run in the past.
Yes.
For better or for worse, it's just how it is. I would say that most of those people are not going through the athletic secretary. They're either speaking personally with a coach that they
Yes.
know that coaches the same program that they coach at a
Yes.
younger age. Or they're connected in the community some other way with a teacher or another staff member or somebody who has access to a building. So, I mean, I would recommend us doing like a Zoom call or something and inviting anybody and everybody that anybody can think of that uses our building, to try to get all of the information out. The same information all at once to as many people as possible, because I think some of those people won't be caught by the athletic secretaries.
Yeah.
I would say the majority probably would not be caught.
Well,
by
and I-
secretaries, they're amazing people.
Oh, they are, and they're doing their best.
Do amazing at the high school, but people,
Yeah.
these programs, I don't think are most of the time calling them.
I have had a few sit downs with some coaches, not gonna name names, and talked with them about some of this too, and I just, there's no blame and shame, it's just the way we used to do things, and we just don't do them that way anymore.
And
So-
maybe this is too strong of a word, but there has been resistance
There
on the
has
part
been.
of staff because they feel this is unfair to me, who's been able to use it for a long time. So there's several perspectives. I mean, this, and it does take some retraining, rethinking, lots of talk.
Yeah.
I like your suggestion, of having some meetings, and I like sit downs with coaches, and I know the ADs have a seasonal meeting with all their coaches as well. I
Yeah.
think this has to be part of that process too.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
And you said that these things that you've mentioned are gonna get updated in the AR, so I was kind of making some notes about that. Yeah, making sure, because you say no keys are gonna be issued, and so you're
That's,
changing
yes.
that, okay.
Mhm.
And then, mostly where I have kind of the two first of all, there isn't a fee schedule.
Yes, it is listed on the web page though, where they have to fill out the application, so
So it's not in the policy.
It's
And-
not in the policy.
And that was purposeful. We
Okay.
decided that the last time, because
Okay.
sometimes fees need to change and it needs to be more nimble. And that way
Okay,
we
so
have
should
better-
that be referenced, because it talks about a schedule of fees, it talks about fees. It kept talking about them in the policy and the AR, but I didn't know where to find that.
Yeah,
So
it could be linked on it. Footnote, right?
somewhere, it
Just
just
reference
needs to say,
We can add that.
it says current fee schedules are available through the facilities department, but that still doesn't tell me to look at the website.
Yeah.
So, okay, so
Yeah,
that would
and they
be,
are.
I mean, there's folks that have been doing this for years, but it's more the people who didn't know that these things were available. They didn't know that our buildings.
And I
could
would
be
venture to
available.
say that people who have been doing this for years also would not know.
Yeah,
Because they
so,
were calling a coach.
so that it's, where do you find that
Integral.
fee schedule? And then, what was my other one? Limited badge, fee schedule, okay. We do have, I know that we have some long-term rentals, it says here, negotiated separately. Is there something that's used that, uses a long-term rental? Is there a preference? Is there a certain time period where you have to say, you know what, let's talk about. Does anybody else want that space? I don't know. I know of some that have used our buildings for years and years and years. And I don't want it to be something where someone says, like you were saying, I want it scheduled from June to August every Saturday from these to these times, and this is when I'm gonna keep it, because this is when I've had it for the last 5 years. At what point do you say it's now open for somebody else to say, I'd like to have that time too? Where's the grandfathering in
Yeah.
or the seniority or preference? And I don't know that because I'm not involved in renting these things, so I don't know if there's already a conversation among people or just a dissatisfaction that they can't get access to the fields or the buildings during prime time.
I have not heard much dissatisfaction.
Okay.
The only long-term rentals I can think of off the top of my head are our church groups on Sundays.
Right.
Those are not prime time
Right,
and buildings aren't used on Sundays, so I haven't seen that as a challenge.
but it is something that needs to be addressed because someone may say, well, I didn't realize we could do that. I didn't realize, or is there an assumption that someone gets to continue to use it?
It would have to be a pretty
Regular basis.
compelling reason for me to approve a long-term rental for anyone other than like the church groups on Sundays or prime time.
And anomalies Janet brings to our attention
Yes.
immediately when something like that comes through. I would also say, the cost has become prohibitive, even if you're a tier 1 user, if you're trying to block out lots of time, it adds up fast. So when you show someone, okay, if you go from what you want to reserve to this,
Then you're gonna
It's
be
gonna be half
billed,
as
and
much.
then that's part of that.
Bill
It helps.
That's part
Yeah.
of that billing. Okay.
that really
Okay.
helps people to
Um,
prioritize.
The other one that I didn't see really specifically called out, and it's been brought up a couple of times to the board, and I know I've brought it up a couple of times. When we rebuilt Gresham High School and we put in the theater, we talked about how we designed that it had access that you could close off the rest of the area so that someone could rent. And it had to be rented with people who also knew how to run the stuff. And I didn't know in your fee schedule.
Yeah.
Or even if saying, facilities that, saying that certain facilities may require additional personnel or something.
Yeah.
Because that's been a question that comes up to me is, how do I use that theater space?
And I think that's in the fee schedule, but
Okay.
not noted in the
So we'll
AR,
look
so
at
we
it.
could look at.
So with the theater, you'll get billed for microphones, you'll get billed for that person.
For the lighting
supporting,
person,
You'll
for
get billed for other
Sound,
equipment that you
use
need
of
to
other
use.
equipment.
It's all itemized out.
And is that qualified then that says you have to pay for that person to be there?
Mhm.
As opposed to, well, I know how to run
Same
the
as with the
soundboard.
pool, you're required to have a lifeguard.
It's
Okay.
listed.
It was on the fee,
Yeah.
I remember seeing it on the fee schedule.
Okay. Maybe I want to run the pool. Okay, all right. I think actually, Sarah, this is really good. I'm not nitpicking it, I'm just
No,
looking
I
at
appreciate
the areas
feedback.
where we've looked at it a lot
Yeah.
over the years in policy committee. And just trying to get it clear because we want people to be able to use our buildings and our spaces.
Mhm.
But also use it in a way that says there's value to it and we're paying for it.
Well, and I give all props to Terry and Janet because they kept catching things. Like Terry put in the line about field lights have to be off by 10 o'clock, like making sure that's in it, like we were catching things here and there and being like, oh, we better note that, we better note that. So we want to be honest and transparent with our community, so there's no surprises.
Right.
And Janet's really, as the person that's usually having the first conversation, sometimes then sends them to us, but has taken a lot of time with people. So I really appreciate that.
Okay.
I would prefer not to look at the AR again.
Too late, already been kids buddy. Okay, any other questions?
Never.
Okay. Nope, all right, let's go on. Thank you. Thank you. Future board agenda topics, do we have any new ones that are coming? I don't think so. I think we're pretty well caught up on stuff. So we're up to announce, oh, let's see, announcements, and I did want just to put in an early plug because I found out about it. This is just something for Sarah, the other Sarah. OSBA has set the dates for when summer board conference will be, is August 8th through 10th in Salem. So if we could kind of start getting a notification for that. And then, oh, the other thing is, when we were at Gordon Russell and we were sitting with our principal groups, we found out that Gresham High School girls have a flag football team. And the Barlow, okay, we got the Gresham schedule. So anyhow, there's still some games coming up in April and May, and it's on their websites to go and do that. So I'm gonna try and get out there and see one of the games. I don't think there's any other, stuff going on right now, right? No.
The budget meeting got canceled.
Budget meeting well, it didn't get canceled. We took care of it at the previous, we adopted
It's
the
no longer
budget.
needed.
So we no longer need to have that. It is crossed off on my list.
The 23rd.
What's that?
The 23rd.
Yeah, so the 23rd is no longer. Okay, so announcements. Yes, the April 23rd, 2025 budget committee meeting was canceled because the committee approved the budget at their April 9th, 2025 budget committee meeting. Our next meeting is May 7th, 2025. Our regular board business meeting at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the Public Safety and Schools building. And there being no other business before the board this evening, we are adjourned. Thank you.
And off the record, the law